Good evening, everyone. Mungil kabasinge. As I had that wonderful introduction done, my full name is Virginia Ngelmao Pedro Rivard Luka. And as she said, I was born on the island of Palau, and I was raised on the island of Guam. Both are in Micronesia. And be honest with me, how many can find Micronesia on a globe? I am so impressed. All right, well, just in case you can't find Micronesia on the globe, if you pick up a globe and if you go east of the Philippines and north of Papua New Guinea, you might just see blue, but that's okay. But if you got on Google and you put in Micronesia, you'll see that it's actually an expanse of thousands of tiny, lush, tropical green islands. And that's where I call my home. Now, so before, or after leaving Guam about a decade ago, I thankfully started here. Actually, I went to Southern Oregon University first, and then I came to Portland State University. And so my mother is from the island of Palau, and locally it's called Belao. But we have these wonderful traditional meeting houses, and they're called an abai. An abai is used, it's a communal space for sharing and learning. And some of the things that might happen at an abai is like a celebration or meetings of chiefs. Another thing, if you can see, there's artwork all the way around the abai. And that artwork is used to help to teach about Palauan legends and historical events and as well as Palauan values. Now, I don't know if you can quite see it, but right here it's a very low entrance. And if you were standing here, you would be able to see that there's actually a carved and painted bat right at the entrance. And it's actually to help remind us that as we're entering that space, that we need to humble ourselves in order to prepare to be in the space. And I too would like to humble myself this evening. Like our first speaker had said, most of us in this room is probably not native to this area. So I want to make sure that I am thankful for everything that was here before me. And you're probably wondering why I'm barefoot and why I have this mat up here. Well, my mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother, we would sit on the floor on a tatami-style mat, and they would share stories. And so I would like to share a story with you this evening. So let me know if it's too much for me to sit down. I hope you can see me in the back there. But here we go. All right. So, growing up, my favorite legend was called the Breadfruit tree of Natal. Once upon a time, there was a time when demigods walked around the people of Palau. And there was this old woman. She lived by herself in her home on the island of Natal. While she had sons, for some reason they were always out traveling from village to village, and she didn't have a son, so she lived all by herself on this island. And, she lived in this wonderful community where when she was younger, she was really invested in her community, and she worked really hard to help the other women villagers. She taught them how to garden and to harvest taro. And as she aged, some of the villagers said, this poor old woman, she doesn't have a husband and she doesn't have any sons who are at home to provide their household with fresh fish on a daily basis. So once in a while, they were generous enough to share with her. And for some reason, everyone in that community decided to up and leave and go establish themselves in another part of the island. But they decided, we're going to leave the old lady here because she doesn't really give anything back to our community anymore. She's old, And so they up and left. And so she no longer had anybody to share that fish once in a while. And she also didn't have the energy anymore to go and grow and harvest some taro. But thankfully, she had this beautiful, large breadfruit tree in her yard that was able to give her access to some starch. So, one of her sons, who was also a demigod, he heard about the abandonment of his mother, so he went back home. He was trying to think, what can I do for my mother? And so he used his demigod power to dive deep into the ocean, and he dug his way through the island until he found the roots of that breadfruit tree. And he dug up through the roots, he dug up through the trunk, and he chose one specific single branch to hollow out. Now this allowed the ocean water to surge up the roots, up the tree trunk, and out that single branch. A fountain of fish, if you will. And this gave his mother just enough fish that she needed. She was so happy she finally had access to fresh fish on a daily basis. Well, unfortunately, the other villagers found out about this and became jealous. They thought, who does she think she is? All she has to do is go to her yard and pick the fish as if it's a ripe fruit from her tree. And they thought, we don't want to go to the ocean and do all that hard work fishing anymore, so we're just going to go to her house and harvest fish. So they did that. They went to her house, and at first it was just a few people, but after a while, they got really greedy. More and more people would go. They cut more and more branches, gathered more and more fish, and before you know it, someone thought, hey, maybe we should just cut this trunk off. And so they did. Can anybody guess what happened to them? So, unfortunately, ocean water violently went up that tree trunk, flooded the entire area, and killed each and every one of them, except for the old woman. If you travel to Palau today, you can still see the island of Natal under the water. Whew. Well, so from growing up listening to this story, I learned, elders took care of me. Now it's really my turn to take care of them. And so, I really learned that my elders are the ones who hold precious knowledge and experience. And I need to be able to hold on to that. Second, I learned to be generous with my resources and not take what's not mine. Third, I learned to be kind to the poor, because really any day now, I can end up in their place. All these college loans and all that, And finally, ultimately, I learned my personal actions does not only have an effect on myself. It has an effect on my family. It has an effect on my village, and my island, my country, my world, our world. And so here, as a graduate student, I'm really focused on learning about cultural sustainability. I will make myself a part of the healing that needs to happen in the Pacific. The islands across the Pacific, Micronesia, Polynesia, Melanesia, all these islands, they're beautiful islands. And like Paul had said, paradise, right? Paul, paradise. And they are, they're labeled as paradise. But, and Paul probably can tell you this, there's a dark side to every paradise. We are inundated with images, from the mass media and tourism, images of crystal clear waters and abundant fish that are swimming around brightly colored coral reefs. And, there are those images of half-naked women with flowers in their hair, laying on warm sandy beaches. But in reality, paradise, those islands across the Pacific, they're not always the easiest place to call home. Whew. So, and so I'm here to share that story and to show you that, just like that globe, you can't really see those islands across the Pacific. I'm here tonight to try to make the invisible visible. And I'm hoping that, there's a realization that, yes, climate change is also in those areas that are invisible. Across the islands in the Pacific, we are battling rising ocean waters and floods and droughts and erosion, as well as coral bleaching. Those are just a very few of what's going on. And the island of Tuvalu, they've been predicted to be the first nation to have climate refugees. Many of the islanders there, New Zealand opened up their doors for those climate refugees to go live. And there are a lot of people who have stayed behind because they are afraid of losing their land, they're afraid of losing their history, their language, and their culture. So, in closing, I would like you to consider 3 things for me tonight. First, please consider, getting to know the issues that are happening with climate change in those areas that just seem invisible to the rest of the world. Second, I ask that you be generous with your resources with people in your community as well as beyond. And third, I would like you to consider ultimately what each and every one of you, your personal actions, their effect not only on yourself, but on the rest of the world. We really are all connected. Komram masulang. Thank you very much.